Hello, and welcome to this T-Level Tactics video for Root Core 1 of the T-Level Digital Support Services course, where we're on our 12th video looking at change requests. So, in this video, we're going to identify the purpose of the Change Advisory Board and break down the stages of a change request. And that's it. Quite a short video this time. As always, these videos are not endorsed or sponsored by any education institution or qualification awarding body. And T-Level Tactics videos should not be used as a replacement to any classroom learning you might be receiving, as the discussion and practical activities with your peers and lecturer will help to expand your thinking and comprehension. Instead, these materials are best used as preparation material or revision to reinforce your learning. And if you're studying the T-Level Digital Business Services course, this content works for you as well. However, it is going to be more contextualized towards IT support roles. So let's take a look at the Change Advisory Board. So once a change is approved on an organizational level by managers or executives in a department, the Change Advisory Board are going to assess that change in detail. The Change Advisory Board is usually comprised of senior experts in their particular area, and will usually include at least one senior member of each department or of each process affected by the change suggested. The Change Advisory Board is going to aim to minimize any risks associated with changes in the organization and ensure changes are aligned with the business objectives. The Change Advisory Board are going to assess, prioritize, authorize, and oversee all changes that happen. They're going to evaluate all changes for impacts on operations, systems, and services, and are going to provide expert advice and guidance on whether a change should be approved, postponed, or rejected. So when a change goes to the Change Advisory Board, what kind of things should we expect? Let's have a look. The Change Advisory Board review all requests. So when they look at your change request, they may want some clarification or refinements to it if they don't think it's quite right yet. They're going to want to see really clear objectives for the change. Think back to smarter objectives and how you could structure those. They're going to analyze the risks that you've identified and potentially add new ones that you may not have thought of. They're going to want to discuss any proposed mitigations to the risks that you've identified, and they may also suggest some of their own too. And if approved, the Change Advisory Board will give recommendations on dates for that change to take place. Now, the Change Advisory Board are going to meet before, during, and after the change period at regular interviews, because they're going to want to monitor the progress of the change, the quality of the change being implemented, and expenditure of finances as well. And if any issues arise during the process, they're going to make recommendations on how to address or mitigate these. The Change Advisory Board are going to want to give feedback at all stages of the change process. They're also going to heavily evaluate the results at the end of it and look at things like, have the objectives been met? What impact is the change having? What issues have occurred? And how have they been mitigated? And this is also part of that sort of smarter objectives process, the evaluate and re-evaluate stages at the end. So after a brief look at the Change Advisory Board, if you're a member of the Patreon, then download the task sheet, and there are a couple of things on there that you can have a go at. It'll be looking at some change requests that have been submitted, and you'll be in the shoes of someone on that Change Advisory Board making a decision of whether they're appropriate and whether they should go ahead or not. I think it'll take about 15 minutes. It's quite a short task, so pause the video here, have a go at it, then return, and we'll move on to the second half of the video. Okay, let's take a look at what a change request looks like. So there can be different types of change in a business. There can be scheduled or regular, things like recurring changes, password changes for major systems, things like that. There could be minor changes, which could be a single or small modification or addition to a process or system. A major change, which could be quite a significant change to a process, software, hardware, or a larger scale change, such as an operating system upgrade, and also urgent, which is usually to fix an issue that's been identified that could potentially lose the organization money, time, or reputation. Things like security breaches, data loss, that kind of thing. Now, regardless of the type of change, they all need to go through the change management process, and it all starts with a request. A change request goes through multiple stages before being actioned, and it's essentially a more formal process of what we've already identified back in video 10, proposing change. And this is where all the factors we've identified will be structured and presented for formal consideration and approval. A change request goes through the following stages: initiation, assessment, approval, implementation, and review. So all types of changes need to be requested through a change request form, which can look a little bit like this. Now, this is only an example, and different businesses and organizations will have their own form of it, but it will often include some similar features. Things like who's making the request, what department do they work in, when have they requested it, and when do they need the change actioned by. You'll see the priority and type of request in there. And it will request things such as, what is it that we're changing? Why are we changing it? What's your reasons and justification? It's got the impact analysis in there that we've looked at briefly before, such as what processes or services are affected, what's the scope of the change, how much money is required, how long will it take, and what resources are going to be required. And that could be staff, it could be hardware, tools, things like that. Further down, there's space for the risks that have been identified and any proposed mitigations. Again, we've looked at those in a previous video. And at the very bottom there is a decision box. And essentially, this change request form, once completed, goes to someone called a change manager. And that change manager is going to make a decision based on the information you give them. Now, this template is available on Patreon, so if you're a member over there, you can download this, you can play about with it. It's in Word document and PDF form, so you can have a go filling out a change request form yourself, just as a bit of practice. Now, the next stage, assessment, that change manager is going to consider all the aspects of the change. They're going to want to determine things like the feasibility of the change. Is it actually possible? Is it going to be successful? They're going to look at the risks you've identified and the impacts on the organization this change is going to have. And they're going to look at all of this, and they're going to consider the viability of this request in terms of money available resources, and making sure the business can still operate if it goes ahead. They may also consult relevant stakeholders and experts in the organization to gather their insights and recommendations to make sure the change is going to be beneficial. The approval step is where the change request is going to be presented to the Change Advisory Board. Change Advisory Board are going to evaluate that change request based upon impact, urgency, the resources required, and make sure it aligns with the organization's goals. And at this stage, the Change Advisory Board may approve, reject, or defer that change request. So it goes through sort of two different approval stages there. The implementation stage is where hopefully we've received approval for our change request, and it's where the change manager is going to coordinate with the relevant teams in the organization to execute it and make it happen. This is where a more specific and appropriate plan is likely to be constructed with specific timescales and the resources required to make this work. This is also the stage where testing and documentation is going to be created and completed before actually going ahead and making this change happen. Once all of that's happened, of course, the change will be implemented and will make sure it works and support the user in its function. And finally, after it all, the review stage is where the Change Advisory Board is going to review the change and its impact. They're going to look at, has the change been successful? Were there any issues? What could be better next time if we have to make a similar change again in the future? And after all that's done, the change manager is going to close the change request. Once it's been successful, once those objectives have been met, they can close the request off and say, yes, we have finished this, it's done. So that was a bit of a look at the change request process. And for Patreon members, you can head back to the task sheet and have a go at the second task now. Now this one's a bit different, as it's going to rely upon and build upon your previous work on the ABC marketing scenario from task sheet 11, Smarter Objectives. So if you haven't completed that one yet, go back, finish it off, as this task really does rely upon the scenario of ABC marketing and what it is that they've wanted you to do. Now, although that sounds like it's going to take a long time if you haven't finished that task sheet yet, this change request task is only going to take 20 to 30 minutes, really. So pause the video here, have a go at that, and then come back once it's done. We'll wrap things up looking at a bit of a summary of what we've done and also a short exam question. So as I said before, bit of a shorter video. We've looked at the purpose of the Change Advisory Board and also broken down the stages of a change request. So let's have a go at a short exam-style question. Explain the role of the Change Advisory Board in the change management process and explain how the involvement of the Change Advisory Board contributes to effective change management within an organization. There are 6 marks available here. And that's it for this video. The next video, we're going to be looking at configuration and recovery. So make sure you're subscribed at youtube.com/@TLevelTactics to be notified when that goes live. And if you're not a member of the Patreon yet, head over there, have a look. You've got that change request in PDF and Word formats. And of course, you've got all the task sheets and everything else that's available to subscribers on Patreon. Thanks for watching. See you next time.